Hello folks, Chris in England. News 24 reports that Helen Zille, the federal chair of the Democratic Alliance, has rubbished her own party's polling. Now, I reported on this yesterday about the internal DA poll of 1,820 people that claims that the ANC is cratering and that the DA is soaring. Now, I'm willing to accept, and I believe wholeheartedly, that the African National Congress is in fact cratering throughout South Africa, and that the municipal elections will see a very bad result for the ANC. They can't rely on rural voters who they hand out KFC three-piece streetwise and t-shirts and give rides to the polling stations. They can't count on those votes at the municipal level. So they're going to have to convince voters in the municipalities to vote for them. And this is the place where the ANC has failed the most dramatically, aside from collapsed infrastructure and its foreign relations. The place that's really failed is in service delivery, and people see that, and they've had enough of it. We've said this before, but things are really reaching an apogee at this stage. But along with Helen Zille, I disagree that the Democratic Alliance is soaring in these polls. It seems absolutely ridiculous. There's no way. Given what's happened over the past year with the Democratic Alliance being part of the government of national unity, in a period in which the National Democratic Revolution has essentially been realized in South Africa. All the wet dreams of the leftists are coming to fruition in South Africa. Land will be expropriated without compensation. The provincial and national governments will dictate what local school boards decide and what the standards are. They've already lowered education to an abysmal level of 30%, 30%, 30%, and 40% your first language to graduate at matric, to get a matriculation. So you are ostensibly qualified to go to university. After having destroyed basic education in South Africa, now they're interfering with local school boards through Bella. In addition, they've created something called the black tax, where they're going to take 3% of corporate profits and give it to groups that are black based solely on their skin pigmentation, no other justification whatsoever. So I am with Helen Zille in her point about this poll being questionable. Now, her argument is one that I made yesterday, and I support what she's saying. We're in agreement on this one. And that is the sample size is too small and the margin of error is too large. The margin of error was 4%, sample size less than 2,000 people. Also, it relies on 100% of those people actually voting, and we know that that never happens. So the bottom line here is that this is a wildly optimistic poll. The DA is probably holding its own slightly, or perhaps even reducing in size as a consequence of what's going on in South Africa. At best, we can expect the Democratic Alliance to be holding its own at municipal level because of its service delivery in places like Cape Town where it controls. But the reality here is that this party is one in disarray. Helen Zille and the Democratic Alliance talk about the blue machine that they're going to gear up for 2026. Well, they have a lot of work to do. A lot of South Africans have lost confidence in the Democratic Alliance because it has no influence whatsoever. Now, we can't fault the DA for Bella being signed into law, for NHI being signed into law, for EWC being signed into law, because the previous parliament, which they were a minority actor and voted against it, those things were passed by the parliament and went on the desk of the president. Ramaphosa doesn't have to sign them and can let them fall, and they won't become law. If they had any influence whatsoever as a major coalition partner in the government of national unity, the second largest party, if they had any influence with the ANC, then, or with Ramaphosa, then this legislation could have been prevented. But the DA obviously has no influence whatsoever and can have no say over what's happening in South Africa. We saw when Corne Mulder from Freedom Front Plus, also coalition partner in the government of national unity, went to America and spoke with officials at the White House. They expressed their exasperation at why South Africa is not seeking to engage the United States in trade negotiations when these 30% tariffs were on the horizon. Now, the South African government has lied to the world, lied to South Africans, claiming that they've been engaged when they haven't. They simply sent a piece of paper and sat back and waited for something to happen. That's not how things work in negotiations. And they know that. It was intentional. They want to play the role of martyr. They want to play the role of victim. And the sacrifice will be made by millions of South Africans who become jobless and go hungry. And there is enough SASSA money to pay all those people $23 a month to subsist on, which no one can survive on. So the bottom line here is that while the ANC may be losing support dramatically in the metros, which I believe is the case, particularly in places like Tshwane, Joburg, and eThekwini, no doubt those places. I'm not so sure about Ekurhuleni, but certainly about Durban, Pretoria, and Joburg. They're certainly losing support left and right. But I'm not convinced the DA is surging. So we'll see what happens in elections coming up. If the DA is smart, their blue machine will be gearing up now and going out and knocking on doors today to convince voters to come to their standard in 2026. If they take their standard approach and sit around and wait till 90 days before the election, like most political parties do, they're not going to gain votes unless it's just by default. I strongly suspect smaller parties, in particular the Freedom Front Plus, will gain a lot of votes in this next municipal election, because people have just had enough of the ANC, and a lot of people, frankly, have had enough of the DA. But once again, unusual situation. I find myself in agreement with leadership of the Democratic Alliance. Helen Zille is correct. This poll is too small, the sample size, and the margin of error is too great to take a lot of confidence in it. That said, I think it does reflect developing trends that the ANC is dropping, and I don't know about the DA rising, but certainly maybe holding its own in metros. Maybe it's rising slightly. So from that standpoint, we can pay attention to it, and the EFF and the ANC should be very concerned about this poll, whether there's too big a margin of error or not, because their drop of 19% in Durban can't be explained by the margin of error and can't be explained by the sample size. What say you, South Africa? World? Does anybody even care? I'm sure somebody does. From England, this is Chris. Cheers.